The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this afternoon's webinar. I'm joined by three business experts from DFK Gooding Partners. I've got Stephen, Wendy, and Angela. Guys, if you want to say hi.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody.
Before I hand over the controls to Stephen, who's going to get us started, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded and it will be uploaded onto the AFTR website. Like always, we'll send around a link to everybody that's registered for this webinar, and email details on how to access that link. You'll notice that you are on mute. However, we will be taking questions. So once the presenters have finished speaking, if you've got any burning questions, please feel free to use your question toolbox to give us a question and we'll do our best to answer that. If we don't get to all of the questions, what we will do is take them offline and come back to you. We've had a lot of questions from previous webinars with a lot of specific details. So we have been compiling specialist Q&A sheets for the various webinars, and circulating that amongst the attendees on the various webinars. I just want to also mention that on Monday and yesterday, our Chief Executive, Jason Westbury, gave an update to AFTR members, and the update was really what's the state of the nation, what is happening in the travel industry relating to COVID-19, and also what's AFTR's response to this. So if you missed that webinar, please go onto the AFTR website, look for the webinar tab under the events navigation, and you can rewatch Jason's webinar. It is really helpful, so I do recommend that you go and look at that, and it really just shows the extent and how hard AFTR is working around the clock for our members, quite literally around the clock for our members, and just some of the great initiatives that are being implemented economy-wide as a result of the work AFTR is doing. On Friday at 1 o'clock, Courtney Duddleston, who is our head of strategy and finance, will be delivering a dedicated webinar which unpacks the second economic stimulus package. So Courtney will be looking at what does this mean for your business and how can you get access to the various offers available. So you can register for that webinar also on the AFTR website. Okay, I'm now going to hand you over to Stephen, and thank you guys from DFK so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Joe, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody around Australia. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'll just, obviously the topic today is how to survive an economic turndown. And I don't think we're surviving a coronavirus anymore. I think the coronavirus is the nuclear bomb. We're now looking at the mushroom clouds of the fallout from the economy, which is going to be far reaching across the globe and certainly having an immediate impact on Australia and already had an immediate impact on the travel industry. So today we're going to guide you through some of the advice that we're providing to our clients in the DFK group. And if I can just click on these slides, because I'm not very good at running slides. Joe, can you help me? So just quickly, this is probably the start of the process in that the DFK is a national group. We have international firms, 14 firms around Australia. Myself and Wendy are at DFK Gooding Partners in Perth. As you can see on the left-hand side of the slide there, we provide a comprehensive list of services to all of our clients. To be honest, this is probably the slide that we can skip over fairly quickly because we want to get into the detail of the presentation. Joe, you'll have to help me. Our disclaimer. So our disclaimers typically are in very small print and you ignore them on the way through. I just wanted to highlight that this one, we're saying that the information here is current as at today. Absolutely, this world is so dynamic right now. As late as last night with Scott Morrison announcing his next round of speeches that he gave last night. This morning, there's more changes. So every minute, every hour, every day, things are changing. So the information that we're providing you is as of today. There's still stimulus packages to come. There's a lot of information still flowing. This is in absolute real time. So we're giving it to you as best we can as at today. If we were to run this seminar tomorrow or next week, I'm sure the circumstances will change. The presentation is summary only. It's for purely illustrative purposes only. What I would say to that is this is real advice that we're giving to our clients today. Myself and Wendy have both been on the phone most of the morning talking to our clients in our office. So this is real information that we're providing, and we're happy to share it with the AFTA members as requested. So today we're going to be covering the financial impact, and I've tried to somewhat customize it to your industry, but again, this is applying to all of our clients. All of our clients are from a cross section of the economy. Most industries are covered. So right now, in real time, this is generic information that is applicable to everybody. We'll also be covering the financial needs and the staff needs and responsibilities, some of the do's and don'ts. So Wendy, our HR manager in our office here, has been on the phone to most of our clients over the last week or two, almost on repeat, talking about all of the same sort of issues, again, across a number of industries and sectors. And then at the end, Angela will touch upon some of the marketing ideas for now and also into the future. So perhaps if we can get into the financial impact, and looking onto the next slide, Joe, is the latest. So as we said, we've been asked to share some of the things that we're talking to our clients about. We appreciate that we're not your advisors, so please take what we're saying as general advice, and we strongly encourage you to speak to your accountant. In fact, they should be speaking to you. Now's the time for accountants to really step up and provide valuable support and financial and guidance information to all of their clients. So if you're not hearing from your accountant, call them, but they certainly should be on the phone to you already. Hopefully from today, there's just maybe one or two things that you may take away or jot down that might ring true for you. So some of this, given that the travel industry is already well and truly entrenched in this crisis and has been for some of you a number of weeks now, some of this you may have already covered, and I certainly appreciate we may be coming to you a bit further down the track than you already are. Other industries, as of last night, have been shut down, so they're about to go through similar experiences that some of you have already been experiencing for some time. So we're certainly very empathetic towards where you are at the moment. So just quickly, where we are at the moment. So the 14-day self-imposed quarantine has been happening for some time. Obviously, Scott Morrison is very concerned that that's not working. People are not practicing social distancing properly, and he's starting to now really ramp up, tighten down the social groups. National lockdown, big question mark. Obviously, a very big call for Scott Morrison to make at some stage, but more and more every day looking likely. But every day that goes past is one more day that we're not practicing this 14-day self-quarantine and lockdown. I think he's clearly looking at what other countries are doing and hoping to start getting some feedback from how they're going, and then he'll make his decision. But I think now the nation is starting to call upon him to do it, just to get it over and done with and take the hit and see how we pull up out of the back of it all. Watch this space. Penalties, the reason why we just mentioned that one, even this morning, the ATO is starting to come out and offer deferrals of lodgements, relief from penalties, easing the pressure on small business. A lot of the discussions we're having with our clients today is how am I going to lodge my tax returns? How am I going to afford to pay my tax? Am I going to be penalised if I don't pay it? The tax office now are starting to bring out some media releases as late as about half an hour ago. So this is all real time. I don't think the state governments are too far away either. Already state governments are coming under pressure from landlords, who are in turn coming under pressure from tenants. So there needs to be some state relief around land tax and some of the other state taxes. So I think it won't be too far away before you start to see some of the state governments. I know Scott Morrison again putting big pressure on New South Wales and Victoria to fall into line and start publicising some of those. International travel, we wrote this slide a couple of days ago. Clearly it's changed already, where now Australia is in complete lockdown with the 14-day quarantine. Domestic travel, borders are closing. Tasmania was the first to go. Borders are closing. The West Australian border overnight is closed. Big queues on the Ceduna on the highway between South Australia and Western Australia. Police monitoring who's coming in and out. Essential services only. Going to be very, very difficult to control. Scott Morrison last night basically said that if everyone that's got a job is essential, which is going to cause some even more confusion. Again, this is very dynamic. Mass gatherings continuing, Scott Morrison limiting these even more and more. Impact on schools, desperate to keep schools together, but again, that's starting to crumble. Call for a national lockdown, as I said. Every day is unfolding, it's changing. All the questions that we're answering is, what do we do? What is DFK doing? How are we helping our clients? As I said earlier, we're talking to all our clients about this. So if we can look at some of on the next slide, understanding the financial impact. So no longer are we living in an ordinary world. It's unprecedented times. We're surviving in a very unsophisticated world temporarily. There's many examples of that. As I said earlier, the travel industry has already borne the brunt of the impact. The world is slowing down. We're progressively shutting down the world. And again, we're all hoping and praying that this becomes a temporary fix that'll solve a lot of the coronavirus spread. It's the only way that governments know how to control this outbreak. What do you do? What can you do? Understanding your business metrics, financial risks. Where do I start? This is going to be a huge roller coaster of emotions for everybody, and all the discussions I'm having with people, initial panic. What do I do? I've relied upon my bookkeeper. They're no longer with me. I've had to let them go. I've got no idea where my financial situation is. All I'm seeing is money going out. The revenue is dropping. And there's definitely an overwhelming sense of panic out there. What we're trying to say to people is, don't panic, and their immediate reaction is, well, that's easy for you to say. My business is being destroyed. I've got nothing left. Where do I go through from here? What I'm encouraging clients to do is take things back to basics and really focus on the core revenue. In some cases, what's left of my revenue. Some clients have no revenue. We're all about preserving what we've got, looking at the core expenses, looking at core staff, what's my essential expenses and my essential costs. Discretionary spending, do I really need to be spending those dollars right now? How do I preserve my capital? How do I save in some cases, what little business do I have left? I think in terms of the travel industry, we will get over this coronavirus. We will get over this economic turndown. The big question is when and what have you got left in your business? And I obviously can't answer those, nobody can. But what we're trying to do is put people in a position where what has left when the industry does rebound, when the economy does rebound, that we've got something that we can rebuild on. What I can encourage you to do is seek help from your accountants and advisors. These are the people who are really going to, or if they don't already understand your business, they're going to be able to apply their own principles and their own experiences to your business. If you've been working closely with your accountant already, I'd hope that you're seeing the impact of what they can provide to you. They're keeping a level head, they're keeping a sound focus on exactly what are the drivers of your business. The financial risks and metrics, what I could encourage you to do as a bit of a rough and ready is start a spreadsheet, look at the expenses that you've got, start to put in some of your core costs and start to really understand the cash flow of your business. On the next slide, what I've said there on the second point, just jumping around a little bit, is cash is king, and everybody is in that mode at the moment. Everybody is limiting the amount of creditors they can pay. They're looking to collect as many of the debtors that they can. This is going to be a juggle that's going to go on for some time now, and we're all going to be impacted on that. There's no industry that's going to escape that. Understand and assess the stimulus packages. As Joe said, AFTA is doing a fantastic job of breaking down what those stimulus packages are. You need to really understand how they impact you, how they benefit you, what you need to do to access some of these stimulus packages, and also, do you need to do anything or are they automatic? Again, you need to be speaking to your accountant and speak to them often, almost drive them crazy if you have to. Continue to produce financial reports on a timely basis. Now, again, complete empathy. I understand that if you're in crisis mode, the last thing you want to do is sit down and complete your zero accounts or complete your MYOB and lodge your BAS. Fundamentally, these are really important because not only does it highlight exactly where you are from a financial and cash point of view, but it also gives you a good indicator of where the money is coming in from and where it's going out to. And when we're looking at forecasts and looking at cash flow and trying to mitigate the losses and mitigate the outflows, it's really important to understand the piece of the packets that make up those costs, because as I said earlier, it can be very overwhelming. There can be a lot of information coming into your desktop. There's going to be a lot of people putting pressure on you to pay. You've got to have the ability and focus to sit back for a minute, have that calm moment and say, okay, who do I need to pay now to preserve my business? Who can I put off? Who can I negotiate with? So as much as the panic is setting in, it's really important to try and remain as calm as possible during these crises. Continually reforecast your as actual results become known. So as new information is being brought to you, as you're being provided with a stimulus package that may benefit you, put that into your package, put that into your forecast. The $50,000 PAYG credits that are being offered, put that into your budget. That's a significant saving that's going to be presented to you over the next couple of weeks as you're launching your March BAS, getting those credits back. It's not cash back in the bank, it's cash not going out of your bank. This is money that you're not having to pay. So that's one of the large creditors that's going to be sitting on your balance sheet, is that PAYG, that employee tax that you've withheld from them, that traditionally you'd be paying to the tax office, is now being provided as a permanent difference to you. It's going to come in as non-taxable income for you. So it's a nice opportunity for you to actually cross one of those creditors off your list, one of those ones that you don't have to pay this time. And that's going to, for some people, really have an immediate financial impact on their cash flow. Continue to get into that monthly routine, even a weekly routine of reforecasting those numbers and looking what you've got. And it's going to be potentially a day by day, week by week, month by month as we crawl out of this. On the next slide there, Joe, sorry, which way are we going? Whoop, there we go. Thank you. Communication with your key stakeholders. So this slide is to my mind, probably the most important slide. So communication with your key stakeholders in your business is absolutely vital. When panic sets in, some of us shrink into our shells and do nothing. Now is not the time to be doing nothing. Now is the time to be communicating with all of your key suppliers, all of your key stakeholders, all your key employees. You need to be talking to them all the time on exactly where you're at, what you're doing. It's really, really important that we don't stick our head in the sand right now. We need to be out there and be proactive. Your landlord's not going to ring you up and offer you some rent-free periods. They're not going to offer you 3 months or 6 months rental discount. You need to ask for these things. Your bank's not going to be doing that either. Your key suppliers are not going to be doing that. They're all going to be sitting there expecting to receive their money, remembering, as I said, cash is king. What I do suggest you do is look at your Xero, your MyOb, your reporting packages, wherever you're getting your financial information from. Break it down into what's fixed and what's variable, which is one of the things I'm explaining to most of the clients. Let's look at what's fixed and get on the phone to those fixed expenses and start negotiating. And I've picked up a couple of them below that I'll come to in a minute. The variable expenses, put a highlighter through all of those and really challenge yourself, challenge your business partners, challenge your management staff to really, do I need to be incurring these costs right now? Is there a way that I can shave some money off my bottom line, off my expenses, and help my bottom line? You're really going to have to challenge yourself, really dig deep and look at exactly what you need to do. Angela, marketing expenses. Marketing expenses right now can be trimmed right back, I would have imagined, but perhaps Angela's got some thoughts on that, so I won't tread in that because I don't profess to be a marketer. The four most common areas that I'm getting questions on right now are banks and secured debt. What do I do about my bank? I've got a loan, I've got a goodwill loan that I'm paying off. I've got a bank loan that I'm paying off that's secured against my premises if I'm fortunate enough to own my premises. I've got some working capital that I've been eating into over the last few weeks, and I'm worried that my bank is now going to come looking for that. It's an overdraft that I've got secured against my house or other personal assets. What are we doing with those ones? As I said earlier, you need to pick up the phone. Perhaps it's a bit hard to arrange a meeting right now with your bank and probably not the ideal situation, but you need to be talking to the bank manager. Personally, I'm talking to all four of the major banks on a daily basis on behalf of clients, and all four banks are bending over backwards for our clients to help them. They're open for business. They've been told by the federal government to start spending and release the purse strings, and they're doing exactly that. I haven't come across in the last 2 or 3 weeks, not one example that I could share where banks are saying, we're not going to help our clients. They are all in absolute preservation mode, and to their credit, they are really stepping up here. So that gives me real comfort that I'm now going back to my clients and say, if you talk to the bank, they will embrace this in a positive way. They will be helping you. We're talking about deferring payments. We're talking about interest only being deferred until for at least a couple of months, if not right through to January next year. Having instalments put on hold for a period of 3 months, 6 months in tight situations. So banks are refinancing, they're looking at pushing out loans, giving people a holiday period, if that's the right term, and putting it to the back end of the loan. So there are opportunities out there to be had with banks, but you have to be talking to them. In most cases, I don't think a bank is going to be ringing you saying, thinking of you, I thought I'd ring and renegotiate the loan. It's up to you to be proactive in that area. Be mindful of covenants. So embedded in all the terms and conditions that some of you may or may not have read with some of your facilities, there'll be covenants. And a classic one is making sure that all of your BASs are lodged on time, making sure all your GST is paid and all your tax is paid. Now, clearly, if you jump down to the third point there is, I'm not going to be able to pay all my tax on time. So straight away, we've breached one of our banking covenants. So you end up in a bit of a circular. I can't pay my taxes, but I'm breaking my banking covenant, which means my bank is going to get upset with me and grumpy with me, which in turn causes more and more stresses. Again, we need to be mindful, address this with the banks that, hi bank, I'm actually not going to be able to pay my tax this month because I've entered into a payment arrangement with the tax office, or I've negotiated to defer my tax down the road, kicking it down the road a little bit, to use a term. So therefore, I'm not actually in default of any of my tax obligations. Can you please confirm that my banking covenants are not going to be breached? We don't want to be in a position in 6 or 12 months' time where the bank then turns around and says, well, dear customer, you've breached your banking conditions. So let's just have that conversation with them now and making sure that they understand that you're entering into a payment arrangement with the tax office, and you don't want to have your covenants breached. Exposure to landlords and premises. So where landlords are now starting to come under a bit of pressure is they're now being asked by the tenants for rent relief, rent abatements, rent discounts. What I'm seeing on most clients is most clients are asking for 75% rent reduction for the next 3 months and a 50% rent reduction through to Christmas. So landlords, unfortunately, are going to come under some immediate pressure. I'm hearing stories of tenants handing back the keys and saying, all my staff are working from home, we're shutting down the premises, here's my keys, and I'm not going to pay my rent for the next month until we return. Obviously an aggressive approach by the tenant and a bit of a catch me if you can approach, and that'll get decided later on as to whether they've breached their own lease obligations, etc. I'm encouraging clients not to do that. I think that's way too aggressive, but what I am encouraging is to speak to the landlords. Most landlords are being very accommodating where they can. They're trying to preserve the cap rates and valuations of their buildings, so they're not wanting to see their rent diminish. They're going to be, if they're in a position, I'm sure they'll be able to be open for negotiation. And again, start with perhaps a 1 month or rent abatement or a 3 month rent abatement where we're getting either a permanent difference or we're pushing it to the back end of the lease. To be honest, pushing it to the back end of the lease is a bit of a hollow sort of gift, because ultimately what it does is squeeze more repayments into a shorter period. So it's really not providing us relief. What we're asking landlords to do for our clients is give us a permanent difference, permanent discount in terms of rent abatement. But again, landlords are going to come under pressure. And as I said earlier, I think Scott Morrison will start to put pressure on state governments to provide some relief to landlords in some of these forthcoming stimulus packages. Tax obligations, I've already touched upon them quickly. Negotiate, ring the tax office, explain your position, providing all of your BASs are up to date and they can get some visibility into what your debts are, they are prepared to negotiate. One of my clients just on Monday, we've got a $300,000 tax bill. We've negotiated to pay $100 a week until December. The tax office said, just make us an offer as long as you're paying something. We were a little bit cheeky and said, we'll pay you $100 a week. They said, fine. Now, I'm not saying that that's applicable to everybody. We maybe got a tax officer on a good day, but the point is the tax office are prepared to negotiate and do what they can. There's been an absolute directive from Scott Morrison to negotiate with small business and help and support business where we can. Varying your personal PAYG instalments for March, I think, is almost a given now. I'm pretty much saying to all of our clients, vary your March instalments, take the pressure off from a tax point of view, vary them to nil. We've always got the opportunity to vary your June instalments up a little bit if you wanted to, but potentially we're going to also be varying our June instalments. And then let's jump to March or May next year when our tax returns are due, and we'll work out what we owe the tax office then. So we're not saying don't pay your tax. What we're saying is let's vary it to nil. Let's take the pressure off our cash flow. The tax office aren't going to start chasing you for or questioning why you varied your tax to nil. We're in the middle of a global crisis, and I think they're going to be fairly understanding if you vary your taxes to nil. So again, have a chat to your accountant. I'm not saying everybody should rush out and vary their taxes to nil, but again, use your advisors, talk to your advisors and see whether that's appropriate for you. Employee obligations, obviously a lot of us are facing employee redundancies and stand downs. There's a lot going on in employee world, hence why we've got Wendy on the phone to cover some of these topics in the moment. All I can say is that employee obligations or in payroll in general is a large expense in your business, and another of the big four that I'm looking at here, something that really needs to be understood and focused. What's my obligations if I stand people down? Termination pays, redundancy pays, how does all of that impact on the financial side? So I'm looking at it from a financial point of view, Wendy will be looking at it from a staffing point of view. So they're probably the four most common areas that I'm facing at the moment, and questions that I'm and topics that I'm talking to clients on a hour by hour basis every day at the moment. Flicking to the next page, developing an impact assessment. So it's probably a bit formal. The advice I've given you so far is pretty much boots on the ground type advice, dealing with it every day. An impact statement is something where you've perhaps got a little bit more time to prepare, and certainly appreciate the travel industry has been decimated pretty much overnight over the last few weeks. But identifying your threats and your issues, quantifying what these threats and issues are, assessing the resources that you have available to you, developing an action plan and implementing it are really the 4 steps to working out exactly what this economic shutdown is going to do for you. Now, as I said earlier, we're not in national shutdown at the moment. We've had time. I'm pretty sure it's coming at some stage. So perhaps this impact assessment can be applied, and these 4 steps can be applied to what happens if we are in a national shutdown. There's curfews applied, and all business apart from the essential businesses are no longer trading. How does that impact on your business? Using these 4 steps just as a guide might get you started in some of the topics to address. You may have already covered some of these in your assessment of your business right now. And as I said in the bottom there, just review it, assess it, and adjust the plan. So once you've got an impact assessment, back to the top, identifying the threats, quantify what you've got in terms of what these mean to you, assess what you have to deal with it, and continue. So it's almost on repeat once you've developed it. The final slide that I just wanted, or second last slide I wanted to cover before I hand over to Wendy, is some of the tough tips for tough times. And I've got these written on a board on my wall, and every now and again I refer to them. But some of the tough tips that I do give to people when tips for tough times that I do is review your creditor terms. So we don't want to be paying creditors too early. Clearly, we're trying to preserve our cash, remembering that cash is king, but we don't want to be paying them too late either. We don't want to come out of the back end of this and have deferred a whole lot of pain for ourselves. We're going to be in rebuild mode. We're going to be trying to rebuilding our businesses. What we don't want is an accumulation of creditors that are really going to be giving you a hard time as the world starts to open up and turn again. Continually review and follow up debtors. Now, I don't know how many of you have trade accounts where you've got customers that are on debtors, but if you do, you need to be reviewing them, following them up. Clearly, they're going to be under pressure from a cash flow point of view as well. Perhaps negotiate terms where they can be partly paying off. At least then you've got some cash coming in and you're chipping away at some of those debtors. So again, try and show empathy and try and negotiate yourself up some payment arrangements where you're actually still collecting some cash throughout the time. As I said earlier, continue to review your banking covenants, understand the terms and conditions, talk to your bank. Also understand what creditors, perhaps secured creditors or even your unsecured creditors, what director guarantees you've provided or pledged throughout the time. Sometimes these can be quiet little sleepers, things that catch up on you. And you just need to understand those. Staffing requirements, I'll skip over that because Wendy's going to cover it and I'm very conscious of time. Micromanage your cash flow, as I've said earlier, set your cash flow up, monitor it on a constantly be reviewing it. Shorten your cash flows and your budgets and your forecasts down to weekly and monthly. We're in the middle of a crisis. This is time to really focus on exactly what you're doing today, tomorrow, this week, next week. Having a 6-month and 12-month cash flow is really not going to help you right now when we're in survival mode for most industries in Australia. I'll just wrap up quickly. There's an opportunity amongst chaos. We put this as a topic on the next slide a week ago when we started preparing for this. I think right now where we're at, given all the unknowns, it's way too early to start having conversations with picking up market share as competitors are struggling. I think right now we're just looking at micromanaging our own business and really focusing on our own backyard. Perhaps in a month or times two, and you feel like you're coming out of the back of this, you may want to be a little bit opportunistic. But I just think at this moment, this is not a conversation that I'd be having. No one knows the total impact. Way too early to tell. We're still in shutdown mode. We're still reaching the bottom of this curve. We don't know when it's going to be. We haven't seen the last of the stimulus packages. Way too early to be getting involved in potential business expansion. Most businesses are going to be contracting right now. As the world continues to turn, perhaps there may be some opportunity later. What is later? I can't tell you. It might be a month. It could be 6 months. It could be anything in between. All I know is that eventually we will get over this and there will be opportunity. But I think right now we need to be focusing on our core businesses and preserving the capital and assets that we've got. So I hope from all of that, I've given you maybe 1 or 2 little tips that you can share and take away. Talk to your accountants, have conversations, don't stick your head in the sand, and good luck before I pass over to Wendy. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephen, and thanks, Joe, for continuing to move us around the slides. Like Stephen, I'm getting, it feels like minute by minute requests from clients and just people in businesses who are looking for what they can do with their staff. It's very easy to sort of pull your heart out of your chest and say, okay, financially we need to do this, this and this with our people and not have them on the payroll. Fortunately or unfortunately, we do have hearts in our chests, and it's important that we recognise and understand the impact that it is having on from a people perspective. And there's a few slides that I'll go through that focus on that a little bit further. One of the things that I do need to talk about is in terms of the Fair Work Act and the award. Yes, there's lots of clauses and paragraphs in the award. The Fair Work Act is convoluted at the best of times. And this is unprecedented territory. There's no clause within the award that talks about a complete shutdown of Australia and what happens and what the entitlements are. So if you haven't had a look at your award, if you don't know what your staff are covered by, if you don't have huge amounts of documentation in your business that covers employment contracts and those bits and pieces, now's the time to spend a little bit of time just understanding what you can and can't do. Just because we're in this crisis and there needs to be some immediate decisions made does not exempt you from consultation procedures and does not exempt you from process. A lot of the information that I've seen at case law level that has come through in the past is it's sometimes less about what happens or the decisions that you make and more about how you go about it. And realistically, although again we don't have any precedent at the moment about what's happening, my suggestion is the better that you are dealing with your staff, the more you're consulting with them, the more you're talking with them, the more you're appreciating the situations that they're in, that will be repaid in spades at the other end when we are looking to ramp up staffing. So that was just a little proviso there that you do need to be aware of what your rights and responsibilities as employers and business owners are. The Fair Work website has some fantastic information that is constantly being updated specifically in regards to the coronavirus and what's available to you and what's available to your staff and your payroll in regards to this. Over the last 4 or 5 days, I've been in and out of the Fair Work website, looking at the latest updates, looking at trying to get information. Sometimes it's down, sometimes it is completely overrun by people clearly doing the same thing that I am. So be persistent if you need to. Even if the website, the back end of the Fair Work website is down, there will be the coronavirus page will still be available for you to have a look at. So that is almost like their screensaver if the back end of the website is not functioning as well as it should be, purely for the amount of people that are trying to get on and trying to get information at the moment. In regards to staffing requirements, I've got a number of dot points here on the screen, and I just want to go through them quite quickly. Again, I'm conscious of time and conscious of giving you some overall information. The sick leave requirements still exist regardless of the situation that your staff are in at the moment, whether they're at work or they're stood down at home. So if someone is sick, and whether that's just a normal everyday illness, whether they're caring for an ill parent or child, or whether they have themselves contracted the coronavirus, the sick leave provisions will still be an entitlement that they can access. So please be wary that you may have stood your staff down, they may be working from home. If they're entitled to sick leave and they've got evidence to suggest that they are, then you will be required to pay those entitlements. In terms of other leave, there's a little bit of, I guess, controversy, for want of a better term, about what's applicable and what's not. A lot of the information that I'm hearing from clients at the moment is that they're getting advice from different associations that are suggesting that if someone is stood down on no pay, that they can access their annual leave entitlements. Obviously, from a cash flow perspective and a financial perspective, that's a bit of an issue for a number of businesses. So I have looked at some of the legislation pieces around access to annual leave, access to payment for annual leave at short notice, and it does, I will say there's a big depends around it. So it's important for you to understand that if a staff member is coming to you saying, yes, I've got 3 years worth of annual leave entitlements sitting in the kitty and I want to take access to them now, you need to appreciate what your rights and responsibilities might be, that rather than just saying absolutely no or absolutely yes. There may be some opportunity to pay that over a longer period of time. There may be some opportunity to, I guess, pay it at half pay, and other bits and pieces, to just conscious of that cash flow element as well. Working from home principles are obviously in place for a number of organisations at the moment. And again, there's lots of difficulties around that. There is no information that I've been able to ascertain from the Fair Work websites around the health and safety aspect of working from home. So, for example, you send your employees home, they're doing a little bit of work at home, they may not be fully occupied, but they're doing bits and pieces. What's your obligations in terms of if there is an injury in the workplace and their workplace is at home, are you required to claim that as a workers' compensation payment? They haven't really gone into that in much detail, any of the websites or any information I'm getting at the moment. My assumption would be that you need to make sure that if staff are sent home to work from home, they actually have a work environment at home that you are aware of. So certainly for some of our clients, we've put together a little checklist that just says, yes, I've got a desk, yes, it's separate, yes, I don't have cords running all over the place. And just to sort of cover off that there has been at least some sort of assessment about their work from home capabilities. The other thing to think about is working from home for any of your staff or yourselves is how you keep connected with each other. There is lots of data coming out at the moment, and increasingly so, about the mental health of your workers, the support that you're giving workers, the keeping them connected, the engagement side of things. And again, a lot of that is, you know, in terms of the priorities of what you're dealing with at the moment, I can appreciate that it's less of an issue for you, but it's going to be a really important one as we start to come out the other end. The staff that have been supported, whether they're working in your facilities or at home or some other arrangement, there will definitely be an opportunity for staff to continue to be engaged with you and go forward from there. Often we've got situations where staff can't work from home. There's no work to provide to them. They don't have the facilities or the IT support. They can't work from home because they're caring for others, or they can't work from home because they need to be supervised. And they don't have the type of job that allows them to work independently from home by themselves. If that's the case, you move into that forced stand-down position, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail on the coming slide. I've mentioned a little bit about for mental health and communication. In my mind, the more that you are talking with your people, the more you are talking with your stakeholders and the people that you rely on to help you run your business and work through your business, the better things will be when we get through to the other side, which absolutely we will. I'll go on to the next slide and talk a little bit more about downsizing options, because that'll sort of talk to me about the forced stand-down provisions, and then I will talk a little bit about ramping up and what happens at the other end. So in terms of downsizing options, we're looking at things around reducing hours. In some cases, businesses are also talking about reducing pay. I will put a little proviso around there, around all of these, and that is it really depends on what your employment contract or your award says. So some people that are on large bonus structures, those bonuses have been just, chopped. There's no ability for them to achieve the bonus anyway, so that one goes away. In terms of reducing hours, again, most of your awards, most of your employment agreements, certainly the Fair Work Act talks about consultation. So you can't necessarily walk into your business on, today and say, that's it, everyone's on no pay. There needs to be some sort of communication and consultation around that. It doesn't need to go for weeks and weeks and months. It can go for a meeting, but there needs to be communication and consultation around what you're doing with everything. I've seen a number of clients that are looking at reduced hours, so they may have put their staff on a roster system where they're only working 50% of the time. I've seen other other businesses that have reduced their staffing to zero, and then just bringing staff back into the workforce or giving them work from home opportunities based on jobs as they come through, and then paying them almost on an hourly rate. The good thing is that the government is very much an encouragement of where there's the opportunity for people to work, be engaged and look at different opportunities. They want to encourage that. So while there's no precedent at the moment, I think we've got a little bit of flexibility in terms of if you can give your staff some work and you're agreeing on what those arrangements will be, you're in a pretty good position to keep them engaged and keep them working. Anything that you do in terms of reduction of hours, reduction of pay, reduction of terms and conditions of their employment, you need to get a letter. It can be a little one-pager that talks about the reasoning behind what's happening and what the outcome will be for them. From there, the staff member would need to sign off on that, and then it can take place. Make sure you put in check-in dates around that. So yes, we're going to do this for between now and until the 30th of June, but we'll monitor it monthly and let you know if anything changes based on the government directions. Redundancies are certainly a hot topic at the moment and are happening more and more across all industries, no doubt in yours as well. So the redundancy provisions still maintain the same. You still need to go through consultation process. You need to talk to your staff about the impact of their job not being around anymore, and you need to consider redundancy payments. For those businesses that have less than 15 staff, there are some small business provisions which limit and sometimes reduce to zero the amount of redundancy pay that needs to be paid to staff. So again, I would definitely say that on a very case-by-case basis, you need to talk with someone who's in the know about the awards and Fair Work Act requirements, particularly in regards to redundancy. The last thing you need at the moment is for you to do it incorrectly and someone make a claim against you. Again, I don't know how real that likelihood is, considering the circumstances that we're in, but my advice is always to be on the cautious side and do your documentation up front. Utilising paid leave, as I mentioned before, this is a little bit contentious at the moment. From a sick leave perspective, you will absolutely have to provide sick leave to any staff that are stood down on no pay. You will need to provide them with sick leave if they have medical evidence to suggest that they are sick. In terms of annual leave, I really would put a question mark around that, particularly from a business and operational and cash flow perspective. There are some terminologies within the legislation that suggest that there may be an opportunity to reduce that paid leave, whether it's annual or long service leave. But again, it would be on a case-by-case scenario. So you will need to have a look at that and follow up on that. Staff members may have already chosen to take leave without pay. That's obviously available to them. All the other provisions. So if a staff member is stood down on no pay, if they're utilising paid leave, if they're taking leave without pay, whatever scenario that you've got in the short to medium term, their length of service doesn't end. This is not a termination of their employment, it's a standing down. So their service length continues. So if you do at the end of the day decide that that position does need to be declared redundant, the time that they're stood down or the time they're on leave without pay will continue to count as service time. So please consider that when you're looking at whether you're making the call now to stand people down or making the call to declare them redundant immediately. Again, my advice is consult, talk to your staff, talk to your people. It will be repaid in spades down the track. Again, really quickly back to employment paperwork, know your award, document everything. If you're having meetings with staff, make sure you make it as a calendar appointment. Make sure you've got evidence behind you that you were having these discussions and it's really open. If you don't need them, fantastic. If you do need them, they're there. Using award flexibility, annualised salary clauses, other bits and pieces, they're in the background and they're there and you need to know about them, but certainly if people are working from home, you need to be able to somehow understand how you're managing their time and what they're going to get paid for, if that's the case that you have. Just a final note that I tend to add to most of my slides before I'll pass over to Angela, because I am really conscious of time at the moment, is what the Fair Work Commission is saying. The Fair Work Commission says if you are running a business, it's your responsibility to ensure you understand your workplace obligations. Before you hire, fire, do anything with your staff. I know this is the last thing on your mind is to keep, up with the compliance of the Fair Work Act and award system. I get it. I absolutely appreciate it. We're in unprecedented times. That said, I would hate down the track there to be an issue because something wasn't dotted or crossed at this time now. That extra few minutes, that extra quick phone call to say, am I on the right approach? Have I got my documentation correctly? Will repay you in spades going forward. My advice always is the shortcut is to take the long way. So do that hard work now. Have a think about what you want to do long term and short term. Really quickly, I mentioned in one of the slides about ramping up, and that's something that you need to consider as government restrictions potentially ease off over the coming weeks and months, pending where we're at the minute. But have a think about how you want to start to re-engage your staff. Again, it doesn't need to be an all or none perspective. If you want to start bringing back people at part-time rates, if you want to start bringing people back on a short-term contract to see how things go, if you want to start bringing people back on reduced hours or reduced pay or different bonus structure, now's the time to have a think about what that might look like at the other end and whether there's any particular staff that you want to stay more engaged with, because you will definitely need them in the future, versus staff that you're probably less fussed about, for want of a better term. And it's important that you start looking at some of those little bits and pieces now. Just because someone is a full-time permanent employee now doesn't necessarily mean that as you start to re-engage and build your business back up, that they automatically come back on as a permanent staff member. And there's ways that we can support and advise you in how that can be managed going forward. I'm really conscious of time, Angela. I think I will pass on to you, and then hopefully we've still got some time to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. And hi, everybody. We're going to spend a little bit of time now talking about marketing and what sort of options are both available to you and sensible to do at the moment, knowing all that you've got on your plate. Joanne, at the moment, I'm not having any luck with making the slides. There we go. So let's see if we can move on. Okay, as both Stephen and Wendy have talked about, the most important thing at the moment is communication. It's being connected and communicating with your clients, really open and honestly. Everyone knows what is going on at the moment in terms of, well, we've all got uncertainty, but we know that things are changing every day. Now, your clients aren't going to expect you to have all the answers, but they will appreciate that openness. That's the most important thing. Now, some of the ways in which you can approach this is your website. If you have control over your own website, and most of us do these days, look at the home page. Is there a message that you can put there now, straight away, that acknowledges what is happening at the moment? I changed my own website this week, and it was also on the Contact Us page as well, making it clear how clients can get in touch for different reasons. Just making that message and that wording current shows that you are on the ball. Also, newsletters. Now, if you've got a client database at the moment, and I hope you do, and I'll be talking about the importance of building that over the coming weeks and months, getting out to everybody there and letting them know what's happening, and is very appropriate in lots of situations is direct contact, picking up the phone or emailing. Now, I'm probably telling you guys how to suck eggs when it comes to that part, because you probably have been in touch with so many clients if they haven't already beaten you to it. But just in particular, keeping that website up to date is an important part of your marketing going forward. At the end of the day, marketing is all about communication. That's all it is at the heart of it, and that's what we need to be doing looking forward, because as we've mentioned, we are in the thick of it now, but we are going to come out the other side, and we want to make sure that they remember you and the way that they were treated. So just going to the next slide. So the key here over the coming weeks and months is to keep your brand visible. The beauty is that you can rely almost completely on digital marketing, which is, without advertising, is pretty much only your time that is being used. So a lot of my presentation today is going to be looking at creative ways in which you can do this, because one thing we do have more of at the moment is time. So I want you to be showing the people behind the brand. Personal connection is more important than anything. So we're not just talking about your logo and that sort of thing. We're talking about you as real people, showing pictures on social media about what is going on, and keeping your clients' dreams tangible. By that I mean is that when we actually are restricted, when we don't have choices about where we want to travel and what we want to do, it actually becomes even more desirable. Now, that might sound a little odd at the moment because, you know, wanting to go to those countries overseas that are also experiencing what we are here is obviously not on the agenda right now. But I know even myself, my husband is English. I can't wait for the day when we can get back to the UK. And a lot of people are thinking about, my goodness, when can I travel again? I have a good friend who's a photographer. She was about to spend the next 4 months traveling around the world doing photography, and all I'm seeing in her feed at the moment is, one day I'll be able to travel again, and she's taking photos on local beaches and things like that just to keep herself in that mood. So we want you to keep your clients' dreams tangible, because no one's giving up travel, they're just stopping for now through necessity. So social media stories, you know, what can you share on your, hopefully, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever posts, whatever platforms you use at the moment, they're going to be more tangible than ever. Destination imagery. I mean, I know I follow a few different pages myself that have gorgeous destination imagery that just fires up my imagination as to where I'm going. Videos. When I say videos, I mean videos of you speaking directly to your clients and people who are interested in travel. Video doesn't have to be boardroom quality, you know, getting the professionals in. In fact, I'm a micro business, I'm a solo business. I do video a lot, literally just with my iPhone or just straight to camera on my desktop. What you've got to be conscious of here is what's in the background. You just want to make sure you've got a consistent background where you're sitting, where you can run these videos, talking directly to people, not some sort of guru on a mountaintop, but someone that's just telling real stories about perhaps the last place we traveled, where we're looking to go in the future, what's going on right now. Be accessible and approachable. Real and authentic trumps perfection. So don't be afraid of showing up on video. It really is the next best thing to face, which obviously we can't do at the moment. Now, don't be afraid to inject a little bit of humor. I run a Facebook group that has around 950 people in it. It's one of my digital marketing activities, which is incredibly important now that I can't meet people face to face. Now, we've been doing Facebook Lives into that group each day to talk about different things to help the business owners that are in there. But we've also been posting some pretty funny videos and different memes in that just to lift people's spirits a little bit. You know, we can only sit in that fear for a certain amount of time and that anxiety before we've got to lift ourselves occasionally. It's exactly the same with your audience, with your clients, with people who are following your businesses. So don't be afraid to inject a little bit of humor. And coming back to what I said about restriction actually makes things more desirable. Reconnecting at the moment to how precious and significant travel actually is, building that emotional connection to that desire to move around the world and to go to the places that you're dreaming of. You've got an awesome opportunity at the moment to build that emotional connection and create that desire for future travel, which I'll give you a few examples of. If you can change the slide for me, Joe. Thank you. Now, exploring partnerships as you build your database at the moment. Now, we all know that our local destinations are hurting too. How can you work together? Now, I know when we were originally approached to speak to you guys about how we could help at the moment, I was had it explained to me that most of your travel or most of your clients are for overseas travel, and domestic travel was a much smaller amount. What I'm actually suggesting at the moment, if that is the case for you, we're looking at a little bit of a pivot. I don't have a crystal ball, but we are more likely to be able to embrace domestic travel than we are international travel in the foreseeable future. So let's build looking at that as a possibility. So think about how I could focus on a local destination each week. Perhaps I could make my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my newsletter, whatever it is that I use, perhaps I could focus on a particular area of Australia each week. This idea came to me because I was watching a news broadcast yesterday where the journalist was someone who was, in her own words, born and bred in Cairns and was really hurting for what was happening locally. Now, if you connect with some people in those sort of local areas and help them promote their local area to your audience, that's what I mean by a partnership. Interviewing local providers, creating some sort of travel local logo and campaign that focuses on different areas in Australia. You guys have got such deep knowledge about what is available to us as local travelers. So let's really band together and highlight that. Offering gift vouchers for sale for future travel. Now, a lot of the local businesses here where I live on the North Shore in Sydney are doing just that. They realise that their current sales are closing down cash flow wise, so they're offering gift vouchers for us to buy so that we can use them in the future. Helps them with their cash flow, helps us support local business, and this is something that is a possibility for you guys as well. Don't be afraid to offer gift vouchers. I'm certainly going to be offering those. I've been buying them up from local businesses to use as birthday presents and gifts in the future, because we all have this real desire to look after our local businesses. We want to look after ourselves as well, obviously, but there is, in a pandemic, in a situation like this, there is a real sense of camaraderie, and you can tap into that as well. So have a think about how you might be able to explore partnerships. And the next slide, Joe. Thank you. Okay, bringing the mountain to Muhammad. When I was Googling last night, I found that there's about 2% of Australians actually do travel overseas between 2 and 4 times a year. Okay, so this is a case of keeping them, as I was mentioning before, connected to that desire. So what have been your most popular destinations in the past? Can you begin to create virtual tours? Now, these are just some creative ideas for you to look at as an individual or talk with your team, but some of the things that came to me were when you're creating these virtual tours is having a newsletter this week which points people to the overview of this particular destination. Let's say it's Morocco, if that's one of your most popular ones in the past. Setting up a Pinterest board with all sorts of gorgeous imagery about Morocco and leaving and providing a link to that when you're emailing out or Facebooking, linking on LinkedIn, wherever you're using your marketing platforms. Each day of the week, highlight a different part of that destination, the food, the attractions, the accommodation, the people, etc. Look at interviewing people who have traveled to that destination before. You'll no doubt have people within your database, clients from the past who visited Morocco, for example. Get them on Zoom. If Zoom is not something you've used before, just Google it. You can get a free account on Zoom. You can also, that's a video interview platform. You could do them on Facebook Live. You could just do an audio. There's many, many ways in which you can interview people and then share that interview with your audience. What we're trying to do here is both entertain, because there's a lot of people who are stuck at home now, and also build that desire. So there's a few examples there of things that you could do when you're looking at specific overseas destinations. On to the next one, Joe. Thank you. And then some creative ideas, some creative connections. There's some other thoughts that we had of how you can keep people in touch and connected to the delight of travel. Perhaps look at creating some type of arrangement with a photo book provider. My daughter works at Kmart. She got some photos printed out the other night, and I saw photo books there, and I was thinking, I really want to go and put all of our photos from our last trip. We went to the Greek islands and England for my 50th, and put those photos all together and send those to my parents who are in New Zealand, who I can't visit at the moment. But that whole thing of you connecting with someone who provides photo books and doing a bit of a deal. Could you provide us with a discount at the moment that I could share with my clients and encourage them to collect all their own travel memories into a photo book? Again, keeping them connected to the desire to travel. Online photography classes. There's a great one I've seen in the Facebook feed at the moment. iPhone photography for travelers. Google that. See if you can approach them and say, we want to work out a deal so we can share this with our audience. Again, it's keeping you connected to your clients. Learning a language, learning to cook, have an Italian night. Maybe Italy's not the best choice, but have an Italian night or somewhere else. Find recipes and share. Now you may be thinking, this is a bit odd. How does this help me sell travel in the future? What this is doing is keeping you very connected and active with your audience so they remember you in relation to creating this desire. It's the people who have bought from us in the past who are most likely to buy from us again. Okay, so finding and sharing travel movies and programs. Check out what's on Netflix. Can you recommend, particular movies that have the destination you're focusing on at the moment? Recommend travel books. Do some Googling and find what you could recommend there. Again, when I was in Kmart with my daughter a couple of days ago, there was a beautiful, very inexpensive book about Italy. Italy seems to be everywhere at the moment. And so again, just keeping people connected with those potential destinations. You might not be able to take them there in real life at the moment, but you can certainly keep them connected to that desire, which is what we're after. Thanks, Joe. If you can pop to the next one. Another idea that popped up was the idea of ATIS local packages. Seeing that 40% of Australians don't travel overseas, and in fact they're more domestic travellers, can we get creative with the packages and the special offers that we can start to get together for the future? Walking tours, golf tours, foodie tours, adventure tours, those were just a few off the top of my head, but I'm sure you have a lot more in your own imaginations. Is it possible at the moment to create some packages with real high personal service and benefits that can only come through you as an accredited travel agent? Now, I know that from what I've heard that a lot of people arrange their own travel domestically, but methinks there can be, again, a wee pivot here. Don't think about trying to convert every potential domestic traveller to buying packages from you. If you just focus on converting 2% of those 40% of people in Australia, that could be a great future revenue for you. So what would make them order through you, work through you, instead of just booking it themselves? Well, the uncertainty that's around at the moment, that feeling of wanting to be taken care of wanting things to be sorted out and very organized, is an emotional feeling that is going to continue for quite a while. The human brain hates uncertainty. It's the worst thing for us, and we are certainly experiencing that now. So So I am not suggesting that we take advantage of that emotion in any overt way. This is simply about reassuring people, and then it will happen internally, that we can take care of it all for you. It will be sorted, it will be certain, there is no uncertainty there. Now, with these local packages, that's the sort of tone that I'm looking for you, and thinking of how can you make them just so organized to the last degree that they feel completely taken care of. And those service and benefits that we're talking about, when you have those relationships with your destinations, when I was talking about possibly creating partnerships just a few minutes ago, this is the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Perhaps if you have that conversation with that destination woman in Cairns, we could find some extra benefits that could be tied into these new packages that are only available through you. So when you create those partnerships that are a win-win, it brings more opportunities for you. So again, just trying to think of things creatively that you can be working on that'll work at the other side of this crisis. Thanks, Joe. On to the next one. This is the last piece, really. Above all, it's about staying positive, visible, and helpful. People will remember the way in which you treated them, the way in which you showed up, the way in which you inspired and entertained them in a difficult time. We want you to build your databases. Now, by that I mean, yes, we want to keep on talking to the people that have worked with us in the past with all of the different ideas that I've shared today, but we can also invite people via our social media platforms to join your newsletter, which I really hope you have. If you don't have one, go to MailChimp.com, mail as in M-A-I-L and chimp as in small monkey, and you can get a free account there, and you can encourage people to sign up so that they can become a part of these weekly initiatives that you may introduce after listening today, where you're focusing on these different destinations. Building that database and exposing people to these possibilities will stand you in good stead in the future. Because remember, above all else, the current restrictions will fan desire for future travel. We're going to get itchy feet. You are the perfect people to be able to take your clients through into this new adventure that is on the other side of the restrictions that we're experiencing now. I know it's really tough. I'm a small business owner, so is my husband. And things have changed dramatically for us too in the last week or two, and who knows what's going to happen next week. So we need to think creatively, as the guys have talked about, working with your staff, getting your expenses down, but thinking about inexpensive marketing that simply keeps you front of mind and utilizes this beautiful digital opportunity that we have. That's what will keep you buoyant until you can actually do the jobs that you do so well in the future. So those are the ideas that I wanted to share. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks so much, Stephen, Wendy and Angela. Really good insights across 3 aspects of a business. We do have some questions, so I will have a read through some of them and throw them out. So firstly, Wendy, this one's from you. And let me just get rid of. Okay, let me just look at these questions. So, hi, Leanne. This is a question about permanent full-time employee. If they're on reduced hours, do they still earn annual leave based on their usual full-time hours? That's a really great question.
Yeah, it is. And the very short answer is yes. So if someone is a permanent full-time staff member and they are stood down to, say, 50% of their hours, they still need to, during that stand-down period, they still need to receive annual leave accruals and long service leave accruals and sick leave accruals for their permanent full-time, their initial contracted hours. Yep.
Thank you. And this is a question from Max. Hey, Max. On that, can employers force full-time staff to take annual leave? I know you spoke about this needing to be done in consultation with them, and the process by which you do that is really important.
Yeah, so look, there are limited circumstances where you would be able to force staff to take their annual leave. I have had a couple of clients that said, look, you know, one of my staff members has got weeks and weeks and weeks. So there is the opportunity for you to require staff to take annual leave should they have that entitlement. Again, there are very strict provisions within the Fair Work Act and the award about how you're going about doing that, and there does need to be a notice period. It needs to, the annual leave accrual level, for example, can't go below a certain amount, usually about 4 weeks. So if someone's got 8 weeks of entitlement, the most you could require them to take would be 4 weeks. But again, that needs to be planned, agreed and consulted with. The best course is to say, particularly if a staff member is being stood down on no pay, to make them aware that should they wish to take advantage of getting paid some of their annual leave entitlements during that time, that you are open to have that discussion. That would be the way that I would go around it. And then for some staff that you, either from a cash flow perspective, can't really release the funds all at once, you can have the talk to them. And in other businesses where you do have some cash flow, you do have the accrual sitting there, you know what you need to pay, there might be the opportunity to reduce your entitlements in that space.
Great. And just on that, we are going to put on the website, again, next to this webinar recording, the details of the DFK team. So if you don't have an accountant that you can talk to, please reach out to the DFK team. They are there willing and able to assist, and you can engage them. So Wendy, another question based on redundancies. Is it possible to make some staff redundant but then still offer them casual work on an hourly rate? And then that way you would also be helping them if you can't afford to pay them full time?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And again, it does need to be treated very carefully. I think I've got myself on repeat ad nauseum around those types of things. But the redundancy provisions allow for you to declare a position redundant and say, for example, it is a full-time permanent position redundant, and then provide staff with an alternate position that they may choose to accept. So you may say to staff, look, we're going to declare our general workforce redundant, but there will be opportunities for people to pick up some casual or ad hoc work, maybe on a short-term contract or maybe on an as-needs basis. If you are interested in that, we'll look at an additional contract in regards to that. So again, it might be that you declare everyone that is full-time redundant and then open up part-time positions that they can effectively apply for or take advantage of, and whether that's a long-term or a short-term or you're just trying to give them something, then there is an ability absolutely to do that at the moment.
Great answer. And then again on redundancies, very popular topic. If an employer's worked, and this is a question from Phil, hi Phil, if an employee has only worked for 7.5 years and they're being made redundant, and so they've obviously started to accrue long service leave but aren't at the 10 years where it needs to be paid, do you have to pay that out? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. And again, long service leave, I will ask you to be reminded that each of the states have different long service leave legislation. So in some cases, the requirement to pay out long service leave entitlements on termination, and whether that's termination by the employers or the employees initiative, and sometimes exists in some states, and off the top of my head, I'm going to say New South Wales is from 5 years. Most of the other states are from 7, that you are required to pay that pro rata entitlement to them on redundancy. But you will need to check your individual state long service leave legislations, or obviously have someone check that for you.
Oh, and actually Phil just wanted to clarify as well, if they haven't been made redundant and they've been stood down, then does the payment for long service leave apply? I wouldn't think
no.
so.
So the quick answer is no. The long service leave payout after the minimum years of service, so like I said, in some states it's about 5 years, in other states it's 7, only exists if there is a termination. So if a staff member is stood down, they're still employed, They still have a job to go back to. It's just a period of time where the employer, for circumstances beyond their control, cannot pay them or cannot employ them. So in that case, they don't have entitlement to take their long service leave because they haven't reached that 10-year mark, and you don't need to pay them out at that stage. Obviously, there may be an opportunity to put some agreements in place around that should you choose to do that, but the long service leave provisions are pretty strict. So you need to make sure they're followed. You can't just sort of agree to do things necessarily without checking what the agreements, awards or Fair Work Act says.
Fantastic. And then I probably could answer this, but I might ask you to step in. There's actually been quite a few questions around, firstly, if a staff is stood down, can they take up work elsewhere? And my understanding is yes. And then secondly, if staff are stood down, are they entitled to receive job seeker payments, which is formerly known as New Start? And AFTA is currently investigating this because we believe so, but aren't 100% clear on the details as yet. Any thoughts on that, Wendy?
Yeah, so on the two-part, I think, again, you need to have a look at what your agreement, award or the Fair Work Act says about taking up other work while they are still technically employed by you. So if you have stood down a staff member because you don't have the work for them and they decide to, get a job somewhere else, does that initiate a termination of employment, for example, from your job because they've picked up work somewhere else? Or are they doing it just in the short term while they sort of get by? In some employment agreements and contracts that I've seen, there's certainly discussions around alternate employment. Some agreements, some employment agreements actually ask staff to notify their current employer if they're picking up work elsewhere. And you make the decision at that stage about whether you do want to keep them stood down and allow them to take this work on the side, or whether you won't allow that to happen, and that would instigate some sort of termination. So you really need to have to think about what your employment agreements might say in that space. So remind me about the second part of that question. Access to New Start allowance or Centrelink benefits.
Yeah, it's now, so New Start is now called job seeker payments.
Job seeker payments, yeah.
And
so then again, sorry, I'll just jump in because I am really conscious of time as well. Part of the stimulus package announcements that came out and were only passed yesterday, so we're still obviously working through those and filtering through those as well. My understanding is that once income goes below a certain level, and that's whether you've been made redundant, been stood down on no pay, or have had your hours cut as a result of the pandemic we're facing at the moment, that you may have access to these the stimulus package announcements and the job seeker announcements from Centrelink. So that'll be something that's definitely unpacked over the next couple of days. There was a lot of talk, particularly around sole traders and I guess self-employed business owners, plumbers and carpenters and electricians and those types of things that effectively work by themselves but have had their work significantly cut because of the social isolation requirements and social distance requirements, that where their income can be seen to drop below a certain amount, that there may be opportunity for them to take up some of the stimulus packages arrangements that are on offer. So that's definitely one to keep hold of. We're looking at I'm personally looking at the breakdown of the stimulus package at the moment and providing some guidance to my clients to give to their staff on how they might go about applying for certain things, particularly when they've been stood down on no pay.
Great. And then I think we'll have one last question for you, Stephen, around PAYG entitlements. So John has asked or made a statement that he was under the impression that where there was a payment to businesses based on PAYG, let me just rephrase this question. It was mentioned in your presentation that the PAYG entitlement is only a credit of the PAYG amount. He was under the impression that it was a payment to business based on the PAYG amount. Is that confusing?
So when you go to lodge your next instalment activity statement, where generally you would submit or pay your PAYG withholding, you are to put a credit on that BAS. So instead of paying that amount out, you're actually now paying less. So that's how the tax office is distributing that payment amount. So the tax office is going to receive less money from you rather than you actually receiving cash from them.
Great. Okay. Helpful.
I hope that answers it. Sorry.
I'll just see if there's any other. No, great. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time today. That was absolutely super informative, really interesting, really helpful, and exactly what our members needed. This webinar, guys, is going to be recorded, put on the AFTR website. Again, any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to the DFK team, and their details will be next to this webinar recording. Guys, I'm getting lots of feedback that was really fantastic and helpful. So thank you so much for the hours that went into preparing this presentation. You truly are the business experts that we can rely on. And of course, after we'll be reviewing any questions that we didn't have time to answer, and we will be coming back to you with those answers. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Please go to the AFTR website and register for Courtney's webinar on Friday as she unpacks the second economic stimulus package. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Joe. Bye-bye.